And good evening, I'm Jack Fink, political reporter here at CBS 11 in Dallas-Fort Worth. Welcome to our Facebook Live tonight. As you know, sanctuary cities is one of the most controversial issues, not only nationwide, but here in Texas. And certainly this issue has made some headlines here in the state this week. We have got a great panel for you tonight. First, I'm joined by State Representative Ramon Romero from Fort Worth, Democrat. We have Kathy Adams, who is a board member with the national chapter of the Eagle Forum. We have State Representative Tony Tinderholt, Republican of Arlington. Lieutenant Thomas Glover, president of the Black Police Association of Greater Dallas. And Ramiro Luna, community activist and dreamer who now lives in Dallas. And we are going to be taking your calls and your questions, not calls, but your questions and comments tonight here. So please don't be shy, but be polite. Let us hear from you. So we definitely want to introduce our senior investigative producer here at CBS 11, Jack Douglas. Jack is going to be helping me with the questions and comments. So Jack, thank you so much for joining us. Well, let's get right to it. This week, Texas made national headlines, as we were talking before, over reaction to the new law here. We have video to show you. There was a scuffle on the Texas House floor involving Republican Representative Matt Rinaldi of Irving and one of our guests, Representative Romero. Rinaldi told Democratic lawmakers he called ICE after seeing demonstrators with signs saying they were here illegally in the U.S. and that they were going to stay. And just today, ICE confirmed it did receive a call from Representative Rinaldi. We are going to hear from Representative Romero shortly, but there were a lot of lawmakers there on the floor that you can see who are trying to calm tensions down between all of the lawmakers. Now, what led up to this was chanting demonstrators who went upstairs in the House chamber, chanting against the new sanctuary cities law. And for a time being, you can see they were all over the Capitol. They were outside holding a rally. The chamber did have to be cleared by the Department of Public Safety before the House business was able to continue. We do have a short clip of Representative Rinaldi after this happened on Monday. Let's listen.
You say things to incite people,
right.
Okay, and that's exactly what I did.
Now, Representative Rinaldi did have a further explanation on his Facebook page, so let's take a look at that. He had said that his life was threatened by Democratic Representative Pancho Nevarez. He said Nevarez told him he would get him on the way out to his car. Rinaldi said he made it clear that if he attempted to, in his words, get me, he would shoot him in self-defense. So now that we've kind of set the table here, let's talk to someone who was there and involved in all this. Representative Romero, in your words, what happened? Did you assault him? Because that's what Representative Rinaldi said.
Well, let's start with where you just said, Jack, where this all began. Where this all began was thousands of Texans, maybe folks from Arizona, maybe from California, folks that have experienced what bills like SB 4 have done in the past around our nation. And they gathered, and they peacefully formed into the gallery. And they came in one by one. They didn't force their way in. They came into the house that belongs to the people of Texas. After gathering, they did, in a very masterful way, a planned demonstration, at which point they had a couple of banners, and they did have signs. Those signs did not say that they were there illegally. They said, "We'll see you at the polls, and we'll see you in the courts." They were Texas DPS. I contacted them. I actually thanked them. I talked to McCraw, and I told them, "Thank you. Thank all your officers. They did a very, very fine job in removing everyone, the same as they've removed other people throughout this year." This is not the first time this has happened. This time it happened because of SB 4. At the point where they had almost removed everyone, myself, along with Cesar Blanco and Philip Cortez, were at the rear near the back mic. And Jonathan Tinderholt will tell you, Representative Tinderholt will tell you the distance between the back mic and the front mic. The Democrats were near the back mic as we were watching everyone leave. Most of the Republicans were near the front mic. At that point, for whatever reason, I don't know why Matt Rinaldi came to us to tell us that he had called ICE.
And what was your reaction when he
I asked
told
him
you?
why. Why did you call ICE? Did you feel as though you needed to do that? Did you do that so that you could tell the media tomorrow that you were the tough guy that called ICE? And he said, and I don't want to cuss, but
please don't.
You know, he said, F them. They're a bunch of illegals. At that point, Representative Cesar Blanco went to him and said, Matt Rinaldi, you are a son of immigrants. Your grandparents were Italian immigrants, and you know that, in your history, the Italians, the Irish were also discriminated against, and it was policies just like this. His response was, you're wrong. My family loves this country, and these people do not. Your people do not. Cesar Blanco is a U.S. veteran, just like Tony Tinderholt, Representative Tinderholt. He stated to him at that moment that he was more American, that he loved this country more than Cesar Blanco. I don't know how you can question someone that served their country. Matt Rinaldi had a breakdown. He had a breakdown, and it started with him coming to myself as I was embracing my colleague Cesar Blanco, as I was giving, yes, a thumbs up to those people that organized a perfect protest.
Let me ask Representative Tinderholt. I didn't see you in that video, but where were you in relation to all this activity?
I was about 10 feet behind the back mic holding my 11-month-old. And Matt Schaefer, Representative Matt Schaefer out of Tyler, was holding his 11-month-old as well. He was a little bit closer, so I think he may have heard some of the things. I just kind of saw what happened. I'll tell you, I didn't hear any of the exchanges between them, but I was disappointed. Well, let me start off earlier. I was impressed that the people in the gallery were assembling peacefully, but they were breaking the house rules. They weren't breaking any laws. They were breaking house rules, and I love my peers like brothers. But I was disappointed when I saw them chanting with them and raising their hands from the House floor, encouraging them to continue breaking the House rules. A lot of the Republicans were saying, look, maybe some of these people on the House floor that are inciting these people to continue chanting and doing what they're doing, breaking House rules, again, they're not breaking laws, should be removed as well. So we were kind of disappointed at the lack of statesmanship by some of our peers. But as far as what happened after that, I handed my daughter off to my wife because it was sine die. I turned and I started to go over to find out what was going on. And what I did see was what you saw in the video. I didn't see anything other than Pancho Navarez go around and go straight toward Matt Rinaldi. I couldn't tell whether he shoved him or not, but I didn't see Representative Rinaldi raising his hands and pushing and shoving. So that's the extent of what I saw. I was disappointed with some of the Democrats chanting and raising their hands and encouraging the behavior up in the gallery. And I'll tell you, we did see a couple of these signs. There were 4 banners, one on each corner, and they were very organized and structured in what they were doing. DPS would go take them. I recall seeing 2 signs that talked about being illegal and something along the lines of I'm illegal and I'm staying or I'm not leaving. But I saw 2 of those. They were square signs about that big, and I recall seeing those. So,
well, tell us what that says. I mean, you're showing me a picture of your phone.
They were, again, very organized, and it says, no hate, Texas immigrants are here to stay.
There was a lot of those, lots of those.
This was a very well orchestrated, very much planned, and there was, I would imagine that everyone that was there knew exactly what this was. So it's false. I personally, and I'm absolutely not negating or calling anyone saying that they're saying anything that's not true, Representative Tinderholt, but I never saw a single one, and I've watched multiple videos over and over, hoping that I will find something that would say that someone there did that. But just given how organized this demonstration was, and to me, it was organized in a sense, and it was a perfect demonstration of your rights to show disgust for something that you feel is wrong. And I said it before, and I will say it now. I was the person raising my hand, saying, "Hey, hey, hey, ho, hey, ho, SB4 has got to go." You know, a lot of folks lose. They're going one way. They would like to see something happen, and they lose. We lose our own bills, propositions. Some people never even see their bills get out of committee. And Tony, we can have another discussion on that, right? But here are folks in the thousands that refuse to say, even though a law has passed and it's been signed by the governor, we refuse to give in and say that this was a just law. And I'm sure that's happened throughout all of our history in America. And it was a perfect examination and demonstration of how to do it in a peaceful way.
I want to get, yeah, go ahead.
I want to address two things. One is, let's go back to Representative Rinaldi stating that he called Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which indeed he did because they came and said they did. Let's think about the process of that. If these folks are holding signs up like that and somebody calls Immigration Customs Enforcement, I don't see an issue with that, just like I wouldn't see someone else having an issue with calling law enforcement for any other law that is being broken. So I don't see an issue with someone calling Immigration Customs Enforcement if indeed people are holding up signs, which I saw 2 of those signs. The second thing is, and we're going to get deep into this, but essentially what this bill is saying is no law enforcement official can create or allow a sanctuary city. They're saying that they cannot create a policy to not enforce the law, to tell their folks not to, because I don't know about you, but I trust law enforcement. I trust them to always do what's right. There's going to be bad folks in every single profession, in the clergy, in the legislature, in law enforcement, in education. We see it everywhere. But by and large, law enforcement does the right thing, and I trust them. And what we're saying is that their leadership cannot say that they cannot enforce. That's what I'm...
And like you said, we're going to get into that a little bit more. I do want to hear what everybody else on the panel says, but I do want to ask you just to follow up. Since this happened on Monday, have you received threats on your life?
Oh, of course. I mean, I'm going to die. I'm going to be shot. Everyone is saying to others, I mean, you know, take good aim. I mean, all of these things. I've been in contact with DPS. They have their local folks come out and look at my house and make sure that I was in a safe environment, that, you know, they do an assessment. I did the same thing. My district director had been receiving calls at the office, so they did an assessment of our district office. You know, look, I'm not afraid for my life, if that's what, you know, the question is. People have asked, are you afraid for your life? I'm not afraid for my life, but I also trust law enforcement. And when I called McCraw, he said, look, Ramon, you're better off telling us than not telling us. So we did that. But look,
and he's the director of DPS statewide.
Yeah, of course. And, you know, this was completely unnecessary. This is not where this state needs to be going. This is not the direction of the state. And I agree with Tony. I absolutely trust law enforcement as well. I wish we would have trusted them when they testified time after time that this was not going to be good for the state. It was not going to be good for the safety of their officers.
Let me see if we have any comments or questions from folks at home watching us on Facebook. Jack, any?
Well, the majority of the comments have been in favor of the law.
So
one person questioned, I can't find it now, but one person questioned, why is this even a debate? If it's a law, if they're breaking immigration laws, it should be treated just like what happens when you violate a traffic law.
Well, let's pose that question to another member of our panelists, Ramiro Luna. And you were in Arizona and fought the Show Me Your Papers law there.
Exactly.
And now you're here. So the question is, if it's law in Texas, what's the debate?
Well, it hasn't been implemented yet, and I think people haven't really felt the grunt of what will occur whenever it does. And as somebody who's seen Arizona, I'm here as a voice of warning to say this is not just a sanctuary bill. It's a Show Me Your Papers law. It's a racist and discriminatory law that will lead to racial profiling. That's exactly what happened in Arizona. The lawsuits were indicative of that. The business community also boycotted at a massive level. So what I'm here to say is that the detriment that it will cause the state of Texas, that's what we're fighting for. We're not just fighting for the immigrant community, we're fighting for the Texas economy, and we're also fighting for people of color, because as this bill says, even detain itself, you're gonna have the right to ask somebody for proof of citizenship. Now, when I was in Arizona, I was also asked for proof of citizenship. So I know exactly what that feels like. I wasn't even driving whenever they asked me for proof of citizenship. And they had the opportunity to do so because of that law. We have already received reports of people who have been stopped and asked for their proof of citizenship, even though it has not yet been implemented.
By who?
We've had reports out of, I believe it was White Rock or somewhere up north, where there was an officer stopped one of our colleagues and them asked.
As I understand it, and then we'll get to the rest of the panel, but as I understand it, the law, this new law, and correct me if I'm wrong, this new law, what it says, and you touched on it a little before, it says police departments cannot have policies that ban their officers from asking police officers. So right now, even before the law goes into effect, the police can ask someone for, you know, what their immigration status is. Now, I've talked to a lot of people who say we don't do that, but I mean, if you're hearing that.
Well, I'll tell you, they have to be detained for a reason. And I rode out with the state troopers in Austin, and we encountered what we thought were 3 illegal immigrants, and they don't mistreat them. They're very respectful to them. They have to be detained for them to ask. And let me pose another question. Would listeners and would you be okay if a law enforcement official leadership told their police officers nothing about sanctuary cities, but they said, look, we don't like to arrest people for DUI, or we don't like to arrest people because of drug charges. So would you be okay with a law enforcement official saying, you know what, in our county, in our city, we're never going to ask the question about drugs or guns or whatever the topic may be, or we're never going to do DUI arrests? Because essentially that is the fair equivalent of what you're saying, is that they can't ask. If they're being detained, they ask you when they pull you over for a driver's license and insurance. I have to identify myself if I ever get pulled over. If they think that I am trafficking narcotics, they're certainly going to ask, do you have drugs, do you have guns, knives in your car? I don't see what the problem is with a law enforcement official asking someone if they're complying with the law, meaning, are you legal, if they're detained. I don't see the issue.
Let me
Can I reply to that?
All right, go ahead, and then we'll get Kathy and then Lieutenant Glover. Go ahead.
And well, the first thing I want to say is the whole term illegal. That's a term that I don't use, and I hope that in the future you don't use either, because it objectifies people. Illegal is a term to describe an object, not a person.
So let me ask you this. Is it illegal when I go through a stop sign?
That is an act, not a person.
Look,
if I were to drive without a license, am I an illegal driver? No.
With
I'm
all
just
due
driving without a
respect,
license.
you can use
But
the
not to
term
the other point.
undocumented or illegal, but they've broken the law, so what they're doing is illegal. So I don't want to mince words. I don't want to detract. I don't want to change the narrative. The bottom line is they're here illegally, so they're illegal immigrants.
Well,
And these are federal laws that are already in place. And all it's saying is that now in Texas, our law enforcement officials have every right to pursue exactly in keeping with what is already federal law. So it's not even creating something new and different. It is in keeping with federal law that's been there all along.
Let me ask you, Lieutenant, because my understanding, I was talking to Dallas City Councilman Philip Kingston today. He told me he would like the city to challenge this law. He told me that the Dallas Police Department has a written policy that does not allow its officers to ask this question of immigration status. What can you tell me on that front?
I can say that a couple of things. Number one, the city of Dallas, when I came on 36 years ago, used to enforce federal immigration laws, and they were unfairly targeting people from the southern border of Texas, and we never put people in jail on a hold for immigration from Canada. So the opportunity for disparity exists. I would go so far to say that scientifically there could have been 50, 175 people illegally in this country at the Texas House, in the Texas Senate on Monday, who were from the Canadian side of this country, and they would never have been challenged on their immigration status. And that's where I have an issue as a law enforcement officer. I represent an organization of African-American police officers that's been around for 42 years. We fight to bridge the gap between police and the community. This law is bad for the state, and it's a reason why the major city chiefs of police in Texas, that includes the chief of police in Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Fort Worth, Arlington, they all oppose this. We rely on our officers to be fair and to enforce the law based on an action, not on a person's country of origin. And when you tell someone that you can ask a person for their immigration status, 99.99% of the time, it will target people from the southern border when those from Canada get to walk away. I'd like to go back to what this distinguished gentleman said earlier about would we like it if someone said don't enforce DUI or don't enforce narcotics laws. If you didn't enforce those laws, you are allowing people of all races and genders to get away with it. It's not aimed at a color or a country of origin. When you tell people that I want you to go in and do A, B, C, D in terms of immigration status and where the person is from, they're going to be targeted. I guarantee you. I did some research before I came, and I found out that the Department of Homeland Security on a report last year said the biggest violators of people who come into this country legally and stay beyond their visa, beyond their legal status, are from Canada. But we never talk about that. There are hundreds of thousands of people from Canada who are in this country illegally, and they never get targeted for deportation because they're not from the South. And so that's the problem I have with it from a law enforcement standpoint. And finally, we count on people from all communities to report crime. When you start targeting a person for deportation, you negatively impact the ability of us to receive credible intelligence on criminals, whether it be domestic violence, child abuse, child exploitation. They shut down and don't report these crimes because they fear that when they come in contact with the police that, okay, now I'll be targeted for an immigration deportation, and that's not good for this country.
That's a point that I want to bring up, but let me get Kathy in to respond.
You know, we have got so many people who are coming in on visas, and they're overstaying their visas from countries all over the world. Maybe in Texas, because we're a border state, maybe there are more Hispanics. And in my mind, they are the same as I am, and I don't see a difference in skin colors. I don't care what color a person is or what their national origins were. What I want to do is see, just like the people who voted for President Trump saw, that we are going to have to be a country that has a rule of law and upholds them. And I don't think that this is a racist issue, and I'm very sad that it's being talked about in that way. I really think that we're talking about, are we going to uphold, and this is a point that Representative Tinderholt has made, are we going to be a nation that is holding to the rule of law, or are we going to be a banana republic? We don't want to be like that.
Representative Tinderholt, and then I'll get you, Representative Romero.
So I always see the narrative get changed when people don't like things, and I personally didn't vote for this bill because of any kind of race whatsoever. For 21 years, I fought in the military to protect our rights and freedoms. I watched America's sons and daughters die on borders, protecting borders of other nations, and we're not doing it here. And I'll give you a good example. My interpreter, it took us 5 years to get my Iraqi interpreter to come to America because he did it the right way. So the problem, we've got a serious issue with the federal immigration system and how it functions. But the bottom line is, I can't see the narrative of racism being any part of us enforcing law. If a woman is being abused and she calls law enforcement, she's not being detained. She's going to give her report, and they're not detaining her. And so I can't imagine a place where we're going to quit, where there's going to be a time where these people are going to quit calling for assistance from law enforcement when they need it. I just don't see that happening. Now, if they've done something illegally and they're detained, regardless of what race they are, they could be Muslim, they could be from Iraq, they could be from France. If they're here illegally, they're breaking the law. And I compare this to any other law that we have, and we should be enforcing all the laws or change the laws. One or the other.
Right.
Representative Romero.
I just you brought up the point. Let's talk about the law. So let's talk about the law for a moment. Up until the point where it got on the floor and it was amended to include the word detained, you should have been with existing policy, and we could have stuck with the narrative that was moving forward throughout the entire summer. That Governor Abbott continued to say, "I'm not going to have Sally Hernandez or any other sheriff around this state tell me that they're not going to enforce the laws and detain people." If you look at the numbers of what during Obama's administration and the amount of people that were deported, it was a tremendous amount of people that were deported. 92% of those had some sort of criminal record. If you look at what's happened so far in the Trump administration, that number has gone from 8% to almost 25%. A tremendous amount of folks that are leaving here without having committed or broken any law since they had entered into this country. Where the debate we could have is whether or not that person continues to break the law by being present in this country, or did they break the law by entering this country. So let's go back. What happened when it went from being arrested to being detained? A lot. And let's not mince words. The law enforcement officer here will absolutely tell you. So I'm going to paint a scenario for you. I grew up in a time when someone said La Migra and everyone ran. Now we have a law enforcement officer.
Immigration.
La Migra.
Yeah.
So now we have a law enforcement officer that's called onto a scene for some brawl. And it happens to be a group of Hispanics. And as he gets out of his car, a group of them run away. What are you going to do? What's an officer to do? He may think that must be the guilty party, so he gives chase. That's a dangerous situation, in my opinion, for that law enforcement to have to give chase where before that person might not have ran away. And it's going to occur. And scenarios like that we don't contemplate today are going to occur because people do not want to leave this country. Because they feel like, I may be here, but I'm not breaking any laws. I'm contributing to this country. I'm paying my taxes. I'm buying a home. I'm doing everything that we would ask any other American to do. We have lost sight of that value, of that individual that Kathy just talked about. I don't see color. But the moment that we realize and say, oh, wait a minute, but you didn't come here legally, as the translator from Iraq did, now we lose sight on that person, that individual, is a contributing member to the society and helping to keep communities safe and growing our Texas economy. And we've completely lost sight of that. And that goes back to Ramiro's point. Can we have foresight? Can we look forward as legislators and say, what is Texas going to look like in the future, in 2 years, in 5 years, or in 10 years, with these types of policies in place? I can't answer that question. I don't know what our law enforcement officers are going to have to face. I just know that I trusted them when they came and testified that this is not going to make us safer. The question remains to be seen, and those that voted yes, and Tony just said he voted against it, and I'm glad. But
I think you voted for it, but you said
for SB4.
But you said
against it.
Well, he said he didn't vote for it for a certain reason, right?
So
but you voted, just to be clear, you voted for it.
I voted for SB4, and I think the one thing, I agree, a lot of these folks that are over here, color doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's France, Mexico, El Salvador, Iraq. We can't lose sight of the fact, no matter how wonderful these people are, there's two things that come to mind. One is we have to address the fact that they are here illegally. They're here illegally, and oftentimes they're not going to get arrested because a law enforcement official has decided that their city is going to create a sanctuary city where I'm a tax-paying citizen. If I go through a stop sign and I don't pay my ticket, a warrant's being issued, I'll sit out in jail. I'll get arrested. Oftentimes they won't. And the other thing that we're not even talking about here is yes, a lot of these people are probably wonderful people and they have great intentions of being here, but how much of their money is leaving this country once they start making this money? How much of it gets shipped outside the country? That's a serious issue that's happening as well. On top of the fact that these people have come here and they broke the law to get here, and that has to be addressed. We can't just let it go.
Ramiro.
Yes, I've been undocumented for approximately 25 years until recently, and I received deferred action. One of the things that I worry most about this piece of legislation is implementation of even college police and campuses. And it's those things to prohibit people from different communities to say, I want to go to college now if they instill fear in going to school. As far as, what are we supposed to do with people like us? I mean, there needs to be a comprehensive plan to citizenship, comprehensive immigration reform, and that's what we're still fighting for. if this law becomes implemented, I have, in my personal take, I'm ready to tear up my credentials so I can be in the same situation as my undocumented brothers and sisters, because I shouldn't be separated from them. There is going to be a great discrepancy in how police officers are going to be treating people of color and regular white people, to be quite honest with you. If somebody says no, it's because you're white and we're people of color, and we've seen two different realities.
We're changing the narrative again. We're talking about race, and this is not about race. It's about law and order.
Well, one of the things I wanted to say, 2 points. Number one, in the state of Texas, when you look up the word detained, it is such a small standard to meet. You can violate a city ordinance for littering or spitting on the ground, and it can lead to a lawful detention. You can own, view, or be a witness of a crime, and it lead to detention. So the opportunity to dispense this law is great. Second thing I want to say, there was discussion about federal laws not being enforced. As a police officer for the last 36 years, I repeat it, I've been on the front line. I've seen how a law like this can be disparately applied. I was working in Dallas when there were officers who would show up to construction sites and walk over and arrest people who couldn't show them proof of legal residency and put them in jail and say, hold for immigration. And so the law, as it has been passed in the state of Texas, does allow for a disparate impact. Second, the bigger point here that people are missing, they're saying it's a violation of the law to be here legally. It's also a violation of the law to hire these people. Why didn't the state of Texas pass a law that says we're going to target the construction companies, we're going to target the home builders, we're going to target the people who own businesses, who hire people, the banks, the institutions? They didn't do that.
Well, there is E-Verify. Is that not right? Now, is that...
No, only for state agencies.
For state agencies.
It's not implemented at the level at which we should have implemented it. That is something that seriously needs to be fixed. But let's go back.
Let me ask you this. Hold on that point. So is that something that you would be interested in working on, next time?
Absolutely. And I think most members, I think probably on both sides to a certain extent, think that that's something that needs to be done. But let me address something that the lieutenant talked about, and it's when they go out to a scene of any sort. Remember, this law doesn't dictate that the officer has to ask for proof. It's saying that their leadership can't tell them that they can't. And so I don't want to go down the avenue of a narrative of saying now we're forcing law enforcement to do these actions, because not every officer will. We're just saying that leadership of a law enforcement agency cannot say that you cannot ask for proper identification.
Let me get some comments on Facebook, or if anybody has a question on Facebook, and we really do appreciate everybody telling us telling us their comments, and also if they have any questions. So thank you so much.
Some of the people who are not in favor of the law say that this is something that is hurtful to people because of what President Trump has done regarding his efforts to ban certain Muslim dominant countries. So they're kind of laying the blame. This wouldn't cause this much trouble if there hadn't been all the controversy surrounding
on the temporary travel ban.
Right. Yes.
And so that's what some folks are chiming in on.
That's right.
Can I tell a story?
Sure.
I grew up in the time of La Migra, wetbacks, and deportations that we were just hearing. I wasn't 10 years old because I used to translate all the time in my neighborhood. The first time I witnessed a mother being deported, because at those times they would even do house raids. And they separated her from her daughter. Her name's Oralia. For a long time, we moved away from those things. Wetbacks seemed to disappear. Didn't hear those words anymore. I was at a rally that was when the unaccompanied minors were coming through. And I was standing on a bridge, and there was those in favor of sending them back somewhere else, and those that were in favor of giving them refuge. And a car passed, and the parents were in the front seat. And then I hear, "Go home, effing wetback." and it was a young boy in the back seat that couldn't have been 10 years old. That disappeared for a long time. This narrative that Tony Tinderholt doesn't want to talk about is here. It's real. You can't deny it. Stop saying it doesn't exist. This is what it's about. And it's hurting people like me, and it's absolutely hurting my children, and it's going to hurt my grandchildren. It's going to hurt everybody that is a person of color, that has dark hair, brown eyes, and brown skin. It's going to affect me. I didn't ask to be called a wetback, but it's happening. And my children are being called wetbacks. What's happening on a college campus? Look at our election cycles now, because this narrative exists. It's dividing us based upon race. All the strides that we'd made since the 60s are being taken down, and they're being taken down by politicians who know that if I create this new wedge issue, I can stir up my crowds of folks that say, this is the rule of law. We are a nation of laws. And that's all I need to say, that those people are lawbreakers. But what they're taking with us is all the other 40 million Americans that are here and absolutely a part of the fabric of this nation. We're U.S. citizens, and we are paying the price of political promises, of securing the border and talking about hurting people on the border. So we can't move away from that narrative, because I'm experiencing it. And if you don't experience it because your color is fair, then you can't live a day in my shoes.
Kathy, you were shaking your head before.
Well, one point I have to make is that my father has black hair and darker skin, and so I guess, you know, that may be one of the reasons why I'm colorblind. And I think that this is really just turning too much into a racist debate here, and we don't need to be discussing that. But one of the other points I think that some of the viewers may be interested in is that this is not like stopping a person just indiscriminately on the street and say, show me your papers, as has been pointed out. It's not that. What it is that if a person is already talking to a policeman for a reason, and I have to say, as a person who 7 years ago was almost killed by a drunk driver, and my back broken, and the doctor is saying it's a miracle that you're even walking. I am so glad that we are a nation of laws, and that we have laws that are meant to protect people. And I think that that is the #1 thing, that whether it's President Trump, whether it's a congressman, whether it's Representative Tinderholt, any of these legislators on both sides, our #1 thing is to protect American citizens.
Let me ask, because I think, Ramiro, you brought it up, and Ramon, I think you've brought it up as well, this element of fear. And today you were there in Dallas. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi really came out and sharply criticized the new sanctuary cities law in Texas. Let's listen to what she had to say.
SB 4, what an act of cowardice. What a legislative act of cowardice. And they are instilling fear in them. That's just the wrong thing to do. Instead, we should be working together for comprehensive immigration reform.
Now, recently, just last week, I interviewed Governor Greg Abbott, and I asked him specifically about this fear issue. And here's what he had to say.
We made clear that there is no danger about the so-called show your papers, but also we made clear that if you are a victim of a crime, if you are a witness to a crime, you have protections. One of the most disturbing things in the aftermath of my signing the SB 4 is the fear-mongering going on in certain communities that actually harm the people they claim they are protecting. There is nothing to fear for anybody who is not a criminal, anybody who's not doing anything wrong.
Okay, so you heard from the governor. I want to hear what everybody has to say. Ramiro, we'll start with you.
Okay, if it didn't have to do with fear, and I lived it because I have been afraid. So for somebody to say fear is does not fit the equation, I lived that fear for 25 years. Now, whenever there were amendments that were considered, one of them saying, can you at least not target, or can at least a police officer not go into a battered women's shelter? And that was denied. Where do you think that fear of that woman who has been beaten by somebody and now feels that by reporting him, okay, let's say this scenario, a woman is beaten by a man. Police officers come and the man says, no, She was the one responsible. She was the one that beat me. They both get detained. Police officer asked the woman for her citizenship. She doesn't have any. The man does. The woman's deported. The man goes scot-free.
But my understanding, and I did ask the governor about this, and I asked the attorney general about this, they both said that as part of this law, crime victims and witnesses to crimes are not to be asked this question. That's part of the law. Am I right or am I wrong?
I'm not sure what part of the law the governor is writing, was reading, or the attorney general was reading. If you're detained, they can ask you for your papers. A victim,
but victims or a witness. I mean,
yeah, there's language, but I think that, without having the bill right in front of me, and we can pull it up, I can maybe have it emailed to me, but I'm on airplane mode. But, we can read through the bill very quickly, and we can find that. I don't believe that that's the case, and I don't believe that that's the way it's going to be implemented. Ramiro's point is true. There's going to be fear. I've gotten so many calls of folks already who don't want to get on the road anymore. They don't want to drive anymore. There's not going to be a reason for these folks to buy as many cars anymore, and they're not going to get on the road. The basic things that they used to do, they will fear doing the most basic of things.
Driving.
So why would you drive your child to school if you could walk them to school now? You're not going to get on the car. You're not going to get in the car if you don't have to. And I'm sure that there are people that are listening and commenting and saying, well, if they're illegal, it doesn't matter. They shouldn't be here anyway. The reality is, so many of them are here, and their children are here. And I don't want to separate families. I don't want to say I was responsible for the law that said, mother, you have to go back to Mexico and leave that child, leave that teenage child here to raise themselves. Already as it is right now in Mexico, because of deportations during the Obama administration, in such a short time, there's estimated it should be about 500,000 U.S. citizen children now who are being taught in Mexican schools that don't know the language there. And what's going to happen to these kids when they turn 18? They're going to come back, and they will not have been educated in the U.S. They won't have, they're going to want to come back to the country, and they're going to have every right to be here. But there's U.S. citizen kids right now in Mexico. And they call them los invisibles, the invisibles. Why? Because there's not the resources in Mexico that we have here. Certainly that's why many of them came. But those resources are not being applied to U.S. citizen children. Those are the immediate effects of deportations, and those are going to increase, and those numbers are going to go from 500,000 to 1 million, whatever the number is, that they're going to continue to increase. But to say that people don't live in fear is absolutely false, and I don't think the governor's fooling anyone.
Let me ask you, Lieutenant, because to police officers that I've spoken with, when they're at a crime scene, they're trying to figure out, are people safe immediately, right? Tell me, what's going through an officer's mind right, when the heat of the moment? I
think the number one objective is to preserve life. Number two is to preserve property. And then you start investigating and detecting the criminals and who did wrong and proceed from there. My point, and I've lived this, and so I've come in contact with thousands of people, victims and suspects, from probably 200 or so countries in my 36 years. And I can tell you that victims will not report the crime. They will not understand that they are exempt from it, regardless of what our governor, what our attorney general says, what members of the state senate, what members of the state house say. When people fear that a police officer can walk up to me and detain me, and it might lead to me being deported, they're not going to talk to the police department. Our number one objective is safety, and for safety, you have to have people willing to talk to the police. It's sort of like, and this is an extreme example, and forgive me if I offend anybody, it's sort of like telling the Jewish people during the Holocaust that a member of the German Gestapo is only going to ask you ABC. Don't worry about it. That's what I hear, and it baffles me, because I've seen people pull up to the gas pump with children in the car. Immigration officers show up, encounter them, take them, or police officers ask for their papers, don't have it, and they gone. And the kids go to child welfare. And so I've seen this, and there's not a single lawmaker in Texas, whether it be the governor, whether it be the attorney general, can tell me anything differently, because I've lived it, I've seen it. I've seen these people who are victims of crime refuse, get scared, and leave because they do not want a law enforcement officer to ask them about their citizenship.
All right, so if that's the case, what is the solution to that? Is it the responsibility of people? Is it your responsibility? Is it everybody's responsibility to get that message out there so that people are not afraid? Is that even possible?
They're not going to believe us.
They're not going to believe.
They're not going to believe us. I think that what our law enforcement officers were doing in waiting for a person to be arrested, because no one here, I don't think myself or Ramiro or anyone else or any other Hispanic person or any Hispanic legislator says we want to defend a criminal in any way. And if you break the law and you hurt someone, you steal someone, you sell dope, you need to go. You don't belong in this country. You need to go. And guess who figures that out? His officers do. They arrest him. They take him to the county jail. And the county jail needs to call ICE. Are there some counties that were not doing that and implementing policies that were not taking crimes more seriously? Then we could have just sharpened our tool, taken our scalpel and said, we're going to define and refine some of the things that we're doing and allow our law enforcement agencies to do their job better. This completely changes the way they do law enforcement. That's what's being lost, and that's exactly what we heard.
Representative Tinderholt, you're shaking your head.
I'm shaking my head because we keep changing the narrative. The bottom line is, since when do we get to start picking and choosing what laws are conveniently enforced? If it meets a certain narrative, my peer, who I have the utmost respect for, wants to enforce the laws that are convenient for his narrative. I disagree. And I come from a pretty racially diverse family. And if those things are being said about him and his family, I'm disgusted by it. But I don't see, and my family doesn't see, where that's the norm. It could be where he's at, and I think it's disgusting that that's happening. But I don't think that we should be handpicking the pieces of law that we want to enforce and don't want to enforce. Remember that we were talking about the folks that are here, great people, trying to make a living, take care of their kids, and we don't want to separate them. I don't ever want to separate them either. But let me tell you, we have to address the fact that they broke the law, and we can't forget that that's what happened.
So why don't we just go door to door?
Why
don't we just go door to door through neighborhoods, go door to door and tell everyone in this country, if you can't prove right now, leave. Because Tony, if you really believe that folks like that need to go, then that's your policy, that you should file a bill that says we're going to go door to door and we're going to remove every single person so that folks know they're absolutely not welcome here anymore. The narrative doesn't help your argument. Or the people that believe what you believe. And you said earlier, you trust law enforcement. I hope you're really listening to the man that's responsible for people underneath him in your career. You know that Tony Tinderholt is probably the person that is teaching the legislature more about what it means to be someone that has worn the uniform than anyone else. He does it on a regular basis, and he knows that that's why he respects me and I respect him. And Tony, you have that brotherhood underneath you, of your brotherhood in harm's way. This gentleman has his brothers and his sisters, his daughters and his sons in harm's way. These are the people we should be trusting about how to move forward and how we could have sharpened SB 4 and what it meant and how we could have addressed sheriffs and what they weren't doing. And otherwise, let's go door to door.
I did talk to my Sheriff Bill Wayburn, who wholly supports this, 100%, because he understands that we're not going out and we're not just targeting individuals based on race, because someone here illegally could be any race. Right. Go ahead.
No, you're good. We have video inside the Tarrant County Jail, because I interviewed Sheriff Wayburn earlier this year, and so we have video inside the jail. And this jail and many others across Texas, they check against, they have ICE agents inside the jails checking to see if the people that are brought in are here illegally. And I know the reason we spoke to the Tarrant County Sheriff back then was because he was applying so that he and his folks would do it without the need for ICE agents doing it. So that's why we have this video, and the sheriff obviously supports this inside the jails, and this is what got the Travis County jail, the Travis County DA in trouble, because she wasn't going to honor ICE requests to detain them. She wanted more than just a detainer request. And so, Ramiro, I just wanted to mention that, but Ramiro, you wanted to make a point as well, and then we'll get to you, Lieutenant Glover. And then back to you, Kathy, yes.
Yes, I mean, my point is just the implementation of things. I mean, we have police officers saying that it is going to be a difficult thing to implement. If you care about security and if you care about safety, why are you providing more responsibility with not enough resources? And these are going to be things where the police officer, if they have murderers, rapists, thieves, they're going to put those aside to take somebody like me out who been here since I was 7 years old and to say, hey, let's shift our resources, because the resources are going to be limited regardless. You're just adding more to that because you say, well, we broke this law, which is a civil offense. I broke the law when I was 7 years old. There's no way for me to fix that, but now I'm going to be able to get deported thanks to the laws that you're passing.
Well, let me ask you this, and let me ask Lieutenant this question. You spoke earlier about, you know, back in the 60s, what you saw as far as...
80s.
80s, I'm sorry. Okay, so back in the 80s.
I was still in elementary school.
Okay, I apologize.
Yep.
Back in the 80s, times have changed. Do you believe that officers, your fellow officers in Dallas, will ask, or, I mean, I've talked to a whole bunch of them. No one that I've talked to says they want to ask anybody what their immigration status is. Do you believe that? Do you believe that your, you know, the rank and file, the patrol officers are under you, will do that?
I think that Dallas has some of the finest officers in the country. I'll start out by saying that. With that, I'll say this. Every police agency in this country has 1 or 2, maybe 1% of officers who don't follow the rule of law, and they will do something contrary to policy. With that said, I'll say it again. I've lived it, I've seen it, and there are laws by the dozens that we don't enforce. For heaven's sakes, we don't enforce sodomy laws in the state of Texas. They've been on the books forever. We don't enforce laws against infidelity that were on the books at one time, against adultery. And so there are federal laws that deal with Internal Revenue Code violations. We don't enforce those. So there are laws that local police don't enforce continuously. And if this wasn't such a hot topic, I don't think that the major city police chiefs in the state of Texas would have voiced an opinion against it. Again, I repeat, the chief in Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Fort Worth, Arlington, they all came out against it because they are all experienced law enforcement officers who've seen what could happen when you shut down. And this is not a color thing, it's not a race, it's not an ethnicity thing. When you shut down a particular group of people, to be similar to if you said everybody over 6'5", we're gonna stop them and see whether or not they jumped over the fence and committed a burglary. I'm gonna be the one to single out. You can't say, well, this is not against tall people. It is against tall people because I'm tall. And so when you pass a law that targets one particular group of people, and people, they have co-conspirators if they're breaking the law. And those co-conspirators, again, are the business people who hire them. I would love to see Governor Abbott call a special session in the next week or so and say, we're gonna look at passing a law to go after the people who employ illegal immigrants in this country. They won't do it.
Kathy, let me have you have the last word because we're running out of time. So,
well, American citizenship. I think that is the bond that we all have. And I'm very sorry, Romero. I really hope you change your mind about ever giving that up. It's the thing that when I go to foreign countries, and I do that on a regular basis, observing United Nations meetings, and it makes me very sad to hear even a former president, as I did in Jimmy Carter, criticizing the United States, or to have former Vice President Al Gore criticizing the United States when they're on foreign soil or anywhere in this world. And so I think that our American citizenship is what binds us together. It is our bond, and I think that it has value. And if we have borders and we have laws, then we have what has created this melting pot, and we want to keep this going. Please don't wait 25 years to all your friends.
They won't let me.
You know,
there's no pathway to citizenship.
No,
they say their line exists. If their line existed, I'll be waiting that.
I have too many friends who have gotten citizenship, just like Mr. Tinderholt's friend from Afghanistan who got his citizenship in 5 years. And so this is the path that we invite people to take. Come and abide by our laws and treasure your citizenship and become part of our melting pot.
Very quickly.
The path does not exist. I cannot become a citizen. I don't care what I do. I cannot become a citizen unless I'm a good citizen. Because there's no pathway. There's no leeway. There's no line.
No, it's in your head.
No, it's true. Look at the law.
It's in your heart.
No, it's true. It's true. I've tried. I talked to attorneys. That's the difference. You're not living my reality. You're living a reality of your own. Talk to me, find a lawyer for me that give me a citizenship, or he can find a lawyer for me to give me a citizenship.
I thought you have one now.
No, I don't.
Oh.
Well, I really want to thank you very much. We could really go on for hours. I can't believe it's been an hour already. We really could go on for a long time. So I want to thank this great panel, really. Representative Ramon Romero of Fort Worth, Kathy Adams of the Eagle Forum, Representative Tony Tinderholt of Arlington, Lieutenant Thomas Glover of the Black Police Officers Association of Greater Dallas, and Ramiro Luna. Thank you so much. Great panel. Really appreciate it. Jack Douglas, thank you so much for helping us out, and want to thank everybody at home as well for coming in with their comments and their questions to the panel. So I've got to get ready. We're going to have a wrap-up tonight on CBS 11 News at 10. Thank you so much for joining us. From all of us here at CBS 11, good night.